And Money is War. Good morning. It is August 29th, 10:34 Pacific. I'm on Highway 900 heading to the day job. Day one of not worrying about having the intro music until I figure out how to get it in off the phone whenever I do one of these. And not worrying about editing. Just going to put it out there and see how that goes, because time is short and editing is costly on time. So anyway, I want to talk about basically the same thing that we focus on here all the time, but I haven't published much of what I've said on the episodes that I've recorded, so it'll still be fresh. So I'm listening to Dark Money, and it's just giving me details about what I had come up with on my own, observing how things were going. And what I want to share with you is that it's not about the government, because I want to remind you that you elected everybody that's there, and you as in a collective you. All right? So sometimes the Electoral College has worked in your favor, sometimes gerrymandering has not, whatever. The point is that if you still want to consider yourself an independent, free citizen of the United States of America, you need to accept responsibility that it's your doing, our collective doing to have the government that we have, and that so many of you are just absolutely angry about. So what that means is you got to look in the mirror, because you're angry about what us collectively have done. So what are you going to do about it? The point being is that the government is our common instrument by which we manage our lives. It's not an enemy. It's not a third party. It's not something separate from us. It is who we are as a nation. You got to think about that. You really do. The only reason that we won World War II is that there was a government to manage an army. We can just start there. And some people's minds just snap shut. They're like, yeah, that's all the government should do is run an army. Baloney. Your problems are not really because of the government. Your problems are because you allowed other people to take charge of your money. And it's not the government. The government is now the dog being wagged by the tail. So unless you're a billionaire, well, maybe a decamillionaire, if your net worth isn't 10 million or more, you're not equal. You don't have the influence that those other people do. And because of the Electoral College, your vote actually isn't your vote, right? I mean, it's boxed up, it's packaged together. And depending on who you are, you feel like the Electoral College worked out for you this past presidential election, or you don't. But it's a flawed instrument. And if you will dig into the history, you'll see that it was put into place for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to segue before I get back to those couple of reasons about the Electoral College, which bullet points are: one, that you are not trusted by some elites, and two, there was a concession to the South, the Civil War losing South. And the Electoral College is actually the son of the Three-Fifths Compromise, which is a complete bastardization of anything, and it was part of slavery, and it was a manipulation, a very distorted, dishonest manipulation of census management. And you can look up the Three-Fifths Compromise and read all about that. I'll get back to it sometime, maybe today. So the segue that is pre-Electoral College, boy, just dump that. Wow, where did that go? All right, so let's just focus on the Electoral College, unless I'm going to remember what I was going to say that I think is bigger picture. The Electoral College allows votes to be gathered in a way that allows for a non-majority president to be elected. And that's happened twice in the last 5 presidential elections. So George W. Bush, on the strength of the Electoral College, won in 2000 versus Al Gore. On it came down to Florida, and then we had all the Supreme Court stuff, blah, blah, blah. But Al Gore won the popular vote, and then Trump beat Clinton. And whether you're glad or not about that, the point is that your vote didn't count because the Electoral College was in place, and the popular vote showed that Hillary won by over 3 million, and if you voted for Trump, you're extremely happy that the Electoral College was in place and that it allowed the popular vote to be defeated so that you got your way. If you're objective about it, you'll look and see that it makes no sense, especially since one of the main arguments for the Electoral College, besides the 2 that I already said, is that you could end up with a regional president due to a lack of communication. Well, we've had mass communication in our nation for a long time. So let's just say that we've had mass communication in our nation, effectively since World War II. We can even just say 1950, post-World War II. So you're looking at over 65 years of effective mass communication where you can find out what you need to know about what's going on in the whole country. In fact, easily the whole world. And if you're willing to do the research, you can figure out a lot of things that are going on. So the Electoral College is flawed. Now I remembered. So cool. It is a relic. It's a remnant, and it's time for it to go. So here's what I want to go. And I'm sure that if anybody's interested in anything I'm saying, that I'll get a lot of flack for this one. But the Founding Fathers are passé, okay? They're done. They did their best, and now it's time for us to carry the ball forward another 10 yards, all right? They did what they could. They had the vision that they had. They didn't have a nation of 335 million people. They didn't have, potential nuclear war. They didn't have, ecologic disasters happening on a scale never seen before. They weren't prepared to deal with some of the extraordinary circumstances that we're faced with. Right? They didn't have an economy that, was, X times the size of the rest of the world minus a couple of competitors. But, isn't our economy bigger than China and everyone else put together still? We hear all this talk about how big China's going to be, yada, 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 yada. China's creating plenty of its own disasters for itself. I suggest that you worry about what you're doing here at home and let China take care of itself, right? You got enough problems right here, and I'll make an analogy on that to Jesus telling you to worry about today and not tomorrow. China's like tomorrow in this story, right? They're somebody else. And you got to believe that they're smart. They'll figure out answers, and maybe we'll learn something from them. Maybe they'll learn something from us. All of this, pitted adversarialism that we've developed and has just become this way of life is ridiculous. You've been manipulated by huge money, not by your government. Your government's there to serve you, and it's not perfect, but do you want to move to China? Well, just go. Or Peru. Or immigrate to Canada. Instead of sitting around crapping your diaper and bitching and moaning, just do something. Either go or do something. And put your fucking gun down. Put it down. Don't be an idiot. You're living in the largest military state in the history of the universe. You're not going to get a thing done with a gun except embarrass yourself, kill somebody you'll feel guilty about killing later, and desecrating whatever faith you seem to, want to say that you possess. Get real. Grow up. put on some big boy and girl pants and say, yeah, we're going to fix this together. We're going to suffer our ego and our pride and put that down enough to have the humility that it takes to work with our neighbor. This is a moral problem. My dad spelled it out to me. It's kind of funny, right? I mean, me and my dad disagree like all the time, like a lot. He and I were born on different planets. But, there's certain things that I got from him that, have served me extremely well. And one little bit of information, one of the things that he said a long time ago now, what is this, 2017, and he said it as long ago as pre-2000, but it was probably post-2000, the time I'm thinking of it, when he said it to me. But ish, right? So a long time ago, 15 years ago, he said, America doesn't have like a political problem or a financial problem. It's got a moral problem. True. Underlying everything, including the fighting with the money, including the 1%, leveraging your ass into a job you don't want with benefits that, you deserve better. Because trust me, the healthcare industry is not being manipulated by the government. Okay? This is a long story. This is a big, long story all unto itself. And I promise you, it's not the government that created the problem. It's greedy people that you didn't see coming that took you out behind the woodshed and got into your back pocket and cleaned your wallet out. That's what it is. Okay, well, you can't legislate good behavior, right? I mean, at a certain point, laws have loopholes, have failings. What you have to have is moral behavior. Now, I'm not saying a religion. I'm not. I'm saying moral, right? There are principles that go across all religions. And yeah, that's right. I respect all religions, all colors, all sexual identities, everything. This is a wide open channel. And if you can't handle that, sorry, it's coming. The tsunami of change is upon you. And just because we have this monstrous blockade of the 1% right now, they will chew their own head off. They are their own demise, really. You've got to fight the good fight. But they are doing things that will lead to their own destruction. They can't survive their own behavior. They seek to control, and through the mechanisms that they're employing, they will reap their own destruction. It's just, that's the way it works, and it doesn't happen super fast, and it's really painful for everybody while it goes on. So you got to keep the faith, and you have to have a long view. So if you're as old as I am, if you're over 50, what you need to believe is that if you fight another good 30 to 50 years and you've seen some positive change, by the time you die, you are successful. This is not going to be quick. It didn't happen quick. Charles Koch didn't spend his way into the dominance that he has now overnight. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars building dozens, if not hundreds, of phony think tanks and fraudulent, because of their real purposes, fraudulent non-profit foundations whose sole true purpose was political manipulation. So it wasn't the government. It was the lobbyists, and it was the huge money that has bought and sold the people that tell you what they believe in and what they're going to do once they get elected, and then they turn right around and away from you and turn back to the money. So they are tempted and they have failed. So the people you've elected has failed. It's not the government. The government, the reason that we're not in another civil war is that we have strong institutions. You don't want to see these things blow up. You don't. Your whole life will turn into a mess. Your children will die from disease and bullets and terrorism, right? I mean, what the hell do you think the Civil War was? Please don't glorify that shit. You don't want to see that come to your town. Oh my God, that was just awful shit. Are you kidding me? Sherman's March on Atlanta. Maybe I've got it wrong. March to the Sea is maybe what it's called. I mean, the events of the Civil War were hideous, tragic, monstrous. Out of the nation out of its mind. And you're worried about a couple of fucking statues? Oh, please. Grow up. Hey, man, I'm your friend. You may think I'm your enemy. You may think, oh, he's just a liberal. I reject that label. We'll talk about one issue at a time. One damn thing at a time. We'll talk about the Electoral College. We'll talk about healthcare, right? And how it's actually constructed and why doctors and hospital administrators are very much at fault because they refuse to manage the money and they let money changers, go look that up in the Bible, money changers take over healthcare. They do nothing for you. They don't understand healthcare. They run numbers. They're analysts, and the only thing they're analyzing is their bottom line. And you and doctors and hospital administrators allowed it to happen. You collectively, that means all of us, are responsible. Because if you can't change it, if you aren't the problem, really, that's what I'm saying. If you aren't the problem, there is no solution. Because if you're not the problem, you can't fix it. You know what I'm saying? If your inaction, if your misjudgment can't be corrected, and I'm saying you collectively, that includes me, can't be altered, redirected, and aligned in such a way as to affect positive change. There is no fucking answer. But of course there is. You've been taught to believe and to have faith your whole life. And whether you've rejected faith or accepted faith, I dare you to look back at your life and see anything that you've ever accomplished. And if you don't find faith in something, it doesn't have to be God, but faith, the principle of faith, at the middle of your accomplishment, then I'll call you a liar. Of course you had to execute, but you had to have a vision and you had to believe that you could do it. Otherwise you wouldn't have tried. That's faith, people. You just got to realize that this is a big deal and that you got to have faith that it can happen. And this is not going to happen quick. That's why you got to have faith. Because some of the changes are going to be so slow that you better take notes. Because you're going to have to talk to people and say, did it get better in the last 10 years? And they're going to say, yeah, remember this? And you go, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got past that. That's right. And that's my prediction of how this is going to go. And my prediction is that we have no idea how some things are going to go. I mean, we're right here in the middle of Hurricane Harvey. And I want to hear some more climate change deniers. And it doesn't matter to what extent man-made influence is occurring. What matters is, doesn't it make sense to change our behavior no matter what? Because it's healthier. Because it makes sense. Hold yourself to the same level of accountability that you want to hold scientists that committed fraudulent data analysis. Now, that's not all scientists, but I'll point out something else here. Science and religion have a lot more in common than they have apart. And I'm going back to that faith thing. So do you think that scientists put a whole lot of effort into shit that they don't have faith in? I'm sorry, there's a principle at work here. You know, they get an idea, and it's based upon something. And then they go ahead and believe that it has merit. They believe it. They have no proof at that point. And then they test it. And they get some results, right? And then they're maybe able to repeat it, right? And that's one of the big discussions. Is anyone out there repeating other people's results? But come on. Let's not say we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater because there's been some corrupt people. I mean, haven't you been willing to continue voting in elections even though we've discovered frauds in public service? Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's be willing to accept the ugly gray. There's no pure white and no pure black. There is none of that. Everything's on a gray scale. Everything's somewhere in the middle. It's really uncomfortable. I've had a hell of a time accepting that, right? I wanted perfection. Well, you know what? There's a hell of a big bunch of gray right in the middle of perfection. you're not going to find 100 people anywhere. I don't care if they're all your family members. I don't care if they're all your neighbors. You're not going to find 100 people anywhere that agree on everything. Line them up. Ask them enough questions and you're going to find a disagreement. That's gray. That's the way it goes. You have to be able to make compromise. You have to be able to come up with a consensus plan that takes us forward. All right, so back to the founding fathers as passe. They weren't idiots. They weren't bad. They knew what they knew. They got done what they got done. It is our responsibility to take the foundation that was handed to us and re-fortify it and redevelop it and take it forward. It's not our job to assume that they were the smartest human beings to ever tread the world and that somehow every word interpreted by who, an ever-changing presence on the Supreme Court, is going to keep reinterpreting those words. So who is it that's in charge? Is it the deified founding fathers to which we can never surpass? Or is it this ever-changing Supreme Court view of some vision of what the founding fathers are purported to have said? Please, let's take a commonality, which is us now, and do our very best with what we've been handed, which includes the founding fathers' vision of what they produced. It doesn't mean it was a final product. You watch software companies 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 2.0. Please don't buy the .0. Maybe we're still on .0. It needs a damn patch. There's bugs in this shit. It's not working the way that we want it to work, right? It doesn't mean it's evil. It means it was produced by people. And it means that the times and circumstances have modified a bit. I mean, principles remain the same. They're timeless. Principles are timeless. And that's a guiding light in this whole discussion, right? I mean, that's true. I mean, I talked about faith. That is perhaps the single most important principle that there is, right? I mean, I can't think of anything else, right? I mean, that, you could say honesty, but I mean, honesty, I think, sort of indicates faith exists, right? Because you got to believe in something to be honest about it. Otherwise, what's the point of even being honest? I mean, there has to be a foundation to which, you're willing to ascribe to even bother to be honest about something. So faith maybe is the very deepest principle of everything. And I believe we're making this whole damn thing up as we go. Look at the Big Bang. That's a whole nother discussion. I love to get into that. But what's outside of the Big Bang? And of course, it's a theory. Who the hell knows how it's really working? But if you operate with the Big Bang, you say, hey, at a certain point, there's this line of creation that's advancing into what? Some other part of infinity or God, call it what you like. But there's no manifestation of physically measurable existence there. What that tells me is we are constantly creating. The creation isn't over and it's never going to end. Never. Time is an element of the creation. So once you get to infinity, then there is no time, right? It's all happening all at once, and that's reality, but our minds aren't attuned to that. Our minds are attuned to our little verse, what we call our life, our reality. I say it's not reality. I say reality is whatever the truth ultimately is. This is our fantasy, our shared dream. But let's make it a happy dream, for God's sake, not a nightmare. It takes cooperation across everybody. There has to be a tiered, level of importance of things, right? I mean, if you're a single issue voter, I urge you to become a broad view voter, somebody that can look at everything that's going on in your life and in your country and start to assign priorities. Not picking one thing because you feel like you might be able to have an impact in it because you're so, insignificant in the rest of your life that you can't possibly have an impact on whatever you might believe is the most important. Do what's most important. Quit having this idea that you can't do it. Now, I've said you aren't equal and you're not in the influence in your nation. Not right now. So I'm going to wrap this show up by telling you to start your own business, get the money, build networks that look like terror cells, because what I'm trying to say by that is, and maybe that's a bad way to put it because it's such a terrible little buzzword right now, but what terrorists do is they build networks of non-communicated, non-connected groups or cells, and that represents, when it comes to entrepreneurship, a business line. It's one line of business. It's one set of relationships. And so if you have like a 1%er target you and say, oh, we're going to take this guy out of the game because he's starting to create problems for us, he could actually be a problem later on. They can't topple your whole game. They can't take you out like dominoes. This is the model of business that will work. It can't be destroyed. It can't be shredded, because every time something points at it, there's nothing to point at. They shoot a bullet into thin air, and maybe they hit a tree, maybe they don't, but it's not your whole organization, right? So you have to start one thing, and as soon as that's going, start another, and then start another. There is no big daddy that's going to take care of you. That's over. They've lost their minds. The age of retirement is over. It was a beautiful thing. Think about it. If you're my age, maybe you're retiring, maybe you're not. And if you took care of your money, you probably can, depending on where you came from. But the age of broad, down, all the way down to lower middle class retirement doesn't look anything like it did for my parents, and certainly not like for their parents. There hasn't been a real pension in place in a long time. Okay? It was a wonderful thing. It had never happened before in history that the middle class retired. Everyone had to keep working. You moved in with your kids, da-da-da, you died, they buried you, etc. Right? You took care of them when they were young, they took care of you, and there's a bunch of that's having to start up again, right? And that's the last 50 years. The pressure has been building for a while, and I'm not saying it's at a breaking point, but if you can't see it now, oh my goodness, please. You've been manipulated. All right, money is war, and that's the central theme. We've got a lot of other disagreements, and in other threads I've said some things that I might back away from, but I'm not going to start in that now because I got to get in here to work. Look, I hope I've said something that'll help you think, right? And start to take action to help our country become healthy, because right now we're not healthy. We got lots of problems. We're sitting on top of the kind of tension that makes people sick with cancer. We don't want America to get cancer, all right? And if we already have it, then we better get out, the treatment. Kevin Star Bryan, Money is War. I'm out.